Let me tell you, I've had some bad days in my life. I mean, truly awful days. There was the time I accidentally dyed my hair neon orange before my high school graduation, or the time a seagull stole my entire hot dog right out of my hand at the beach. But nothing, absolutely nothing, prepared me for the sickening, stomach-dropping moment I had 3 weeks ago. I had just gotten back from my younger sister Clara's funeral. Clara. Oh God, I still can't say her name without feeling a huge lump in my throat. She was the funny one, the wild one, the one who could always make me laugh even when I felt like the world was ending. Her death was sudden, completely unexpected, and it left a hole in our family that felt too big to ever fill. The funeral was exactly what she would have wanted. Tears, laughter, slightly inappropriate stories, and way too much lukewarm coffee. I spent the ride home completely drained, emotionally and physically, just staring out the window trying to process the fact that my little sister was gone forever. My name is Amelia. I'm 58 years old, and the house I was pulling up to, a charming little 2-story colonial with a slightly overgrown front yard, right here in suburban Connecticut, has been my sanctuary for the last 30 years. It's where I raised my 2 kids, Ethan and Charlotte. Every chipped paint spot, every slightly squeaky floorboard, every scuff mark on the wall by the laundry room, it all tells a story. It's my story. I pulled my old Volvo into the driveway, the gravel crunching under the tires, a familiar and comforting sound. I killed the engine and just sat there for a moment, letting the silence wrap around me. I needed to just walk inside, put on my comfy sweats, and maybe cry into a bowl of ice cream. That was the plan. A simple, predictable plan for a devastating day. But as I got out and walked up the front path, something was immediately horribly wrong. The house looked different. Not structurally, but the details. There were 2 huge, gaudy planters flanking the front door that I had never seen before. Concrete monstrosities painted bright aqua blue. Then I noticed the welcome mat. Mine was a simple, slightly faded one that said, "Home Sweet Home." This new one was black, covered in some kind of bizarre, stylized skull graphic. Okay, weird, but maybe Charlotte, my daughter, had swapped it out while I was at the funeral. She was staying here for a bit, helping me out, or so I thought. I reached into my bag for my house key, the heavy brass one with the little dolphin keychain Charlotte made me when she was 7. I slid it into the lock and it didn't fit. Not even close. I tried wiggling it, pushing it harder, pulling it out and checking if I had the right key. I did, of course. The key felt alien in the cylinder. It was then that the cold realization hit me. The entire lock set had been replaced. My beautiful, familiar front door now had a gleaming, brand new, completely different keyhole. I took a deep, shaky breath, telling myself there had to be a mistake. Security update. Did Charlotte arrange for some kind of emergency maintenance? But as I peered closely, I saw the fresh gouges around the plate where a hurried, clumsy installation had taken place. This wasn't professional work. This was rushed and deliberate. I raised my hand and knocked, a sharp, insistent rap on the unfamiliar wood. No answer. I knocked again, louder this time. Nothing. My panic started to curdle into a deep, furious disbelief. Who the heck changes the locks on someone's house while they are at their sister's funeral? Just as I was about to reach for my phone to call Charlotte, the door swung open. Standing there wasn't Charlotte. It was Mason. Mason, my 27-year-old future son-in-law. Or, as I often thought of him, Mason, the man who wears sunglasses indoors and uses the word synergy far too often. He was technically a decent-looking guy, tall, well-built, with that kind of aggressively styled hair that looks like it takes more effort than running a marathon. But there was always a slickness to him, a kind of cheap veneer of confidence that made my radar go off every single time. And in that moment, standing in my doorway, blocking my access to my own home, his face held the exact expression I had always secretly feared. Smugness mixed with utter entitlement. He was wearing a too-tight t-shirt and holding a massive, steaming mug of what smelled like my expensive, good-quality coffee, the kind I only bring out for special occasions. "Oh. Hey, Amelia," he said, not with sympathy for my loss, but with an air of mild annoyance, like I had interrupted his very important coffee break. He didn't move an inch to let me in. "Mason? What in the world is going on?" I asked, my voice tight. I gestured toward the door. "My key doesn't work. Did you change the locks?" He took a slow, deliberate sip of coffee, holding my gaze over the rim of the mug. It felt like he was performing for an audience of one. Himself. "Yeah. I did," he confirmed, the corners of his mouth twitching up in a little half-smirk. "Just yesterday. It was a whole thing. Gotta upgrade the security, right? You know, for the future. The future. I repeated, my brain still struggling to catch up with the sheer audacity. Mason, I just got back from my sister's funeral. I need to get inside. Where's Charlotte? And where is my key? You need to let me in right now. He pushed the door open just a tiny bit wider but still stood firmly in the frame. That's when I noticed a couple of huge, industrial-looking storage boxes stacked in the hallway behind him. Not my boxes. His boxes. Look, Amelia, there's no easy way to say this, so I'm just going to be straight with you. Charlotte and I talked about this and we made a decision. A smart, financially sound decision for our future, he announced, his voice suddenly shifting into that irritating, overly serious business tone. I felt a cold dread settle in my bones. Decision about what, Mason? He sighed, a dramatic, long-suffering exhale, like I was the unreasonable one here. He even managed to roll his eyes a little before meeting my gaze again. The house, Amelia. The house belongs to us now. It's official. Charlotte and I are moving in and we're starting our life here. And honestly, he leaned in a little, lowering his voice conspiratorially, as if he were sharing a profound truth. You're too old to live alone anyway. It's not safe. You need to find somewhere else. Like a nice, assisted living place. We even have some pamphlets we can give you. The world tilted. I swear I heard a ringing in my ears. He didn't just say that. He couldn't have. Not after my sister's funeral. Not my home. Excuse me? Did you just tell me to leave my own house? I whispered, my voice sounding incredibly far away like it belonged to someone else. The adrenaline, which had been dormant for the whole funeral, came rushing back in a fiery wave. Mason just shrugged, completely unbothered. He actually chuckled. It's just practical, Amelia. We need the space. We need the capital. And frankly, this place is going to look amazing once we gut the kitchen and get rid of all the, old stuff. He waved a dismissive hand, gesturing at my life, my memories, my entire existence, as if it were nothing more than outdated furniture. This was the moment. The exact moment when the grief, the exhaustion, and the shock coalesced into a laser-focused, terrifying rage. I stood on my front porch, completely locked out, listening to a 20-something man I barely tolerated tell me I was being evicted from the home I bought and paid for. Before I say anything else, I need you all to drop a comment right now. Tell me the first thing you'd do if you came home to this. What city or time zone are you watching this from? I want to know who's hearing this insane story. I stood there, staring at the skull doormat and the smug look on Mason's face, realizing that the battle for my home, my peace, and my sanity had just begun. And I knew one thing for certain. Mason had absolutely no idea who he was messing with. Mason, still blocking the door, just stood there waiting for me to melt down, maybe burst into tears, and meekly accept the handful of assisted living brochures he was probably holding somewhere behind his back. But what he got instead was a chilling calm. When I get truly angry, I don't shout, I go quiet. Dead quiet. And my face must have been giving off major Ice Queen vibes because his smug little smirk faltered just a tiny bit. Charlotte, I stated, keeping my voice even. Where is my daughter? He sniffed, adjusting his grip on the coffee mug. She's running errands. She's getting some paint swatches. We decided on a nice, modern gray for the living room, replacing all that beige you have. Mason, I said, stepping closer, my eyes never leaving his. Listen to me carefully. This house is mine. I bought this house in 1995. I paid off the mortgage 5 years ago. The deed is in my name only. You and Charlotte are engaged, not married. She has zero legal claim to this property. And you have less than zero. You're a guest. A very temporary, highly irritating guest. He laughed, a sharp barking sound that felt totally forced. Oh please. Don't be dramatic, Amelia. Charlotte and I are one now, basically. We're getting married in 6 months. And she's family, right? Family takes care of family. That's why we're taking this burden off your hands. It's what Clara would have wanted. That was it. Bringing Clara into his pathetic, greedy little scheme. That was the line. I felt a visceral, white-hot hatred for him in that moment. To understand why this house meant everything and why Mason's assumption was so bafflingly wrong, you need a little backstory. Ethan, my son, is a darling. He's married, lives 3 states away, and is building a beautiful life as an environmental scientist. He's always been responsible and respectful. Charlotte, my daughter, is a different story. He's creative, vibrant, and a little bit flighty. She's an artist, which I fully support, but financially she's always struggled to find her footing. I love my daughter fiercely, but she has a habit of attaching herself to men who promise her the moon and then try to take her apartment, metaphorically speaking. And Mason? Mason was the worst of the bunch. He claimed to be a fintech entrepreneur, but mostly seemed to spend his days in my house, ordering expensive protein powder online and giving unsolicited advice about my investment portfolio, which, by the way, is handled by one of the best firms in the city, thanks to my late husband's careful planning. Charlotte and Mason moved in 3 months ago. She claimed they needed a temporary place to save money before the wedding. I agreed, despite my reservations about Mason, because I would do anything for my daughter. I made one rule: respect my house, respect my privacy, and remember this is temporary. Now here is the crucial part that Mason clearly missed, or deliberately chose to ignore. My late husband, Robert, made sure I was completely protected after he passed away 5 years ago. He was an incredibly successful civil engineer, a stickler for detail, and he despised family drama. Robert and I had this house deeded only in my name, Amelia Harper, and we established a very, very strict family trust. The trust stipulated that upon my death, the house would be sold, and the proceeds would be divided equally between Ethan and Charlotte. Not their spouses, not their future children, just them. And there were ironclad clauses about occupancy. No one, not even Charlotte, could move a non-dependent partner into the house without my express, written, notarized permission, which I had deliberately not given to Mason. The reason Robert did this was simple. He saw through people like Mason a mile away. Robert wanted to ensure that neither of our children could be financially manipulated or bullied by a future spouse. He protected me and he protected them. Mason, in his arrogance, assumed that because Charlotte was my daughter, he could bully the old woman into signing over her assets or moving out. He saw a nice, paid-off house in a good neighborhood and he saw a quick win. He leaned back against the door frame, still holding my expensive mug like he owned the place. Look, Amelia, we both know Charlotte is going to inherit this place eventually anyway. Why wait? It's just paperwork. We are doing you a favor, honestly. You're retired. What do you need a 4-bedroom house for? We need to start a family here. We need the space for the legacy. Legacy? I scoffed. The only legacy you're interested in, Mason, is how quickly you can convert my hard-earned equity into a down payment on a sports car. His eyes narrowed. That hit a nerve. Watch your tone, Amelia. You should be grateful we're offering you a soft landing. We could be difficult. We could say you have to pack up right now. The audacity was breathtaking. I looked down at my simple black dress, the one I wore to say goodbye to my sister. I looked at the hideous aqua planters and the skull doormat. And then I looked back at Mason, who represented everything I despised: entitlement, greed, and a complete lack of moral fiber. You haven't been inside my house for 30 seconds, Mason, and you're already trying to leverage my grief into a real estate grab, I said, my voice barely above a whisper, which is always more effective than shouting. I suggest you go inside, grab your boxes, and leave before Charlotte gets back. Because when I talk to her, this is going to be incredibly ugly for you. He actually smiled. A pitying, superior smile. Oh, Amelia. Don't you get it? Charlotte is in on this. She agreed. He helped me change the locks. She said you wouldn't mind, that you're always complaining about how much yard work this place is. That was the deepest cut. That my own daughter had conspired with this self-important leech to lock me out of my house the minute I drove away for her aunt's funeral. The emotional connection I had been building up with the narrator's story about Clara and the house. It all fractured. That betrayal hurt more than the eviction. She helped you? I asked, the last remaining thread of my composure snapping. Yeah, she was worried about you living alone, you know? It's time for the next chapter. And that chapter doesn't include a 58-year-old woman in a 4-bedroom house. Now, I'm going to need you to move your car off the driveway. We're expecting the painters this afternoon. The realization sunk in. This wasn't just a simple mistake or misunderstanding. This was a calculated, planned takeover. Mason and Charlotte saw my sister's funeral as their opportunity, the window of time where I was too distracted, too devastated to fight back immediately. The disrespect was astronomical. The cruelty was strategic. I didn't argue. I didn't plead. I didn't cry. I simply looked at him, absorbing the entirety of his misplaced confidence, and I made a quiet decision. Mason wanted a battle based on legal technicalities and cheap power plays? Fine. I would give him exactly that. He had just messed with the wrong, recently widowed, financially secure, highly organized mother who happened to have a brilliant, aggressive lawyer on speed dial. I didn't utter another word. I just turned around, walked back to my car, got in and pulled out onto the street. Mason watched me go, hands on his hips, wearing the triumphant look of a man who thinks he's just won a major victory. He thought I was driving away defeated. He thought I was going to an extended stay hotel to call retirement communities. He couldn't have been more wrong. I was driving straight to my lawyer's office, and Mason was about to learn that there's a massive difference between having a plan and owning the deed. I drove away from my house, or what Mason now called theirs, in a total fog. But the fog didn't last long. The initial wave of betrayal and shock receded, leaving behind a sharp, clear determination. My hands were gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles were white. Mason assumed I was driving off to cry on a friend's couch. Instead, I was driving with the single-minded focus of a shark who just smelled blood in the water. My lawyer is a woman named Elizabeth, Liz, Chen. She's the kind of lawyer who smiles sweetly while dismantling your entire argument with surgical precision. She handled my late husband's estate, navigated the trust documents with incredible skill, and she is the person you call when you want a legal nuclear bomb dropped on someone. I pulled into the parking garage near her downtown office and called her from my car. It was already late afternoon, but I knew Liz was the kind of person who lived for a good crisis. Liz? It's Amelia Harper. I know it's late and I know I just got back from Clara's funeral, but I need you right now. I've been locked out of my house. There was a moment of silence on the other end, and then Liz's voice, smooth and professional, cut through the tension. Amelia, I am so sorry about Clara. Take a breath. Locked out? What do you mean? I quickly but thoroughly recounted the whole horrifying scene. The new locks, the skull doormat, Mason's smug declaration that the house belonged to them now, and the truly stomach-churning detail that Charlotte was apparently complicit. As I spoke, Liz didn't interrupt. When I finished, the silence stretched again, but this time it felt different. It felt heavy, like the air before a storm. Hey Amelia. Before we go further, let me confirm one thing for my records. That house, 452 Willow Lane, is deeded solely in the name of Amelia C. Harper. Correct. Absolutely correct. You and Robert made sure of that, Liz. And the trust documents are airtight, right? No one inherits until I'm gone. Ironclad, Amelia. The trust is clear. No rights of survivorship or occupancy can be extended to future spouses without your explicit formal consent. Which, I take it, you did not give to Mr. Mason, the self-proclaimed fintech entrepreneur? Liz asked, a hint of steel in her voice. Even she knew about Mason's pretentious title. I told him he was temporary. I didn't give him anything in writing, Liz. I wouldn't give that man the time of day, much less my house. Excellent, she said, and I could practically hear the sharp, determined look on her face. Mason and Charlotte have just committed an illegal lockout, which, given the specific laws regarding deeded property and residency in this state, constitutes criminal trespassing with intent to establish residency. This is a severe legal misstep on their part. They didn't just change the locks. They attempted an illegal self-help eviction on the rightful owner. So what can we do? I need them out, Liz. Today. I don't want them to spend another night in my home, sleeping in my bed, drinking my coffee. I said, the venom seeping into my tone. This is where the layered conflict came in. The immediate problem was getting back into my house. The deeper, secondary challenge was the betrayal from Charlotte, which I had to push down and compartmentalize for now. And the looming moral dilemma was, how hard do I hit my own daughter? Liz, sensing my internal conflict, spoke calmly. We proceed with maximum legal force, Amelia. He wants a quick business deal? He's going to get a legal reality check. Since they are refusing you entry to your own residence, we bypass the typical civil eviction process, which can take weeks. We go straight for an emergency, non-prejudicial order to vacate and restore possession immediately. I can have the papers drafted and an accompanying police escort scheduled within the hour, based on this illegal lockout. A police escort? I whispered, my stomach tightening. It felt extreme. It was extreme. It's necessary, Amelia. Mason is demonstrating hostile possession. The police are there to ensure peace and enforce the court order for immediate access and removal. We need to make sure this is done correctly, legally, and definitively so he can't pull this stunt again. They will be given a maximum of 30 minutes to pack necessities and leave, or face arrest for criminal trespassing. This is their ultimatum. This was the terrifying turning point. Up until this moment, I could pretend this was a misunderstanding, a terrible lapse in judgment on Charlotte's part. But now I was signing off on a plan that would bring the police to my own front door, to evict my daughter and her fiancé. Do it, Liz, I said, the words feeling heavy on my tongue. Draft the papers. I'll meet you at the house in an hour. She agreed, her voice shifting back to her professional powerhouse mode. One last thing, Amelia. When we arrive, do not engage with Mason or Charlotte. Do not argue. Do not debate. Do not let them draw you into a shouting match. You say nothing. You let the court order and the police officers speak for you. Got it. Got it. Silence is golden, I affirmed, starting my car. The drive back felt 10 times longer. My mind was racing. Kept thinking about Charlotte. Was she truly this cold? Did she really think I wouldn't fight back? I had always given her everything she needed and honestly a lot of what she simply wanted. I paid for her art degree, helped her with rent when she moved out, and opened my home to her when she asked. And this was the thanks I got. This sudden, vicious grab for my home, timed perfectly to exploit my grief. The closer I got, the more I rehearsed the scene in my mind. Mason would try to argue. He would pull out some fabricated document or legal jargon he read on a forum. He would try to intimidate the police. Charlotte would either look away in shame or worse, double down on her entitlement. I had to remain an immovable object. I had to be the picture of righteous, quiet fury. As I turned the corner onto Willow Lane, my headlights swept across my house. Looked exactly the same, yet utterly alien. Mason's ridiculous blue planters seemed to glow under the streetlights. His car, an expensive black sedan he claimed was a company write-off, was parked right in the center of the driveway, completely blocking my access. I pulled up across the street, killed the engine, and waited. 5 minutes later, an unmarked black SUV, Liz's vehicle, pulled up behind me. A moment later, a marked police cruiser followed, its silent lights flashing a subtle, serious blue. Liz got out of her SUV, a briefcase clutched in one hand, looking impeccably professional and utterly formidable. She approached my car and tapped on the window. I rolled it down. Ready, Liz? As I'll ever be, Amelia. Remember the rules. Silent and steady. We're simply restoring the rightful owner to her property. She spoke briefly with the 2 officers, handing them a folder. The officers, a stern-looking man and a younger, very serious woman, nodded. They were here for business. This was it. The moment of truth. Mason and Charlotte were about to get the rudest awakening of their spoiled, entitled lives. They thought they had won. They thought they had executed the perfect low-cost takeover. They hadn't realized that the person they were trying to defraud was the one person who knew all the details, all the legal protections, and all the right people. I took a deep breath, steeling myself. I was no longer the grieving sister. I was the homeowner. And my eviction notice for them was about to be delivered. I got out of my car, my legs feeling surprisingly steady. I walked across the street with Liz at my side and the 2 police officers following right behind us. The blue flashers on the cruiser cast an unsettling, rhythmic light over the front of the house. Everything was silent, which made the walk up the path feel incredibly dramatic. Liz was the one who knocked this time, a firm, authoritative rap that echoed in the quiet evening air. We waited. After a few tense seconds, the door swung open again. It was Mason. He wasn't wearing his smug smirk this time. His expression was a mix of irritation and confusion. He probably thought I had come back alone to beg. He started to speak, a dismissive tone already in his voice. Amelia, look, I told you need to call Charlotte. I'm busy right now and... He stopped dead when his eyes registered the 2 uniformed police officers standing directly behind me, and then the impeccably dressed Liz Chin holding a thick folded document. The color drained completely from his face. It was priceless. If I hadn't been so furious, I might have actually laughed. What is this? What's going on? His voice suddenly sounded much higher, stripped of its false confidence. Liz stepped forward, her posture radiating authority. Remember my lawyer, Liz? The one who was calm while preparing the legal nuclear bomb? She now looked like she was about to drop it. Mr. Mason, I am Elizabeth Chin, legal counsel for the deeded property owner, Ms. Amelia Harper. We are here to execute an immediate court order for restoration of possession and non-prejudicial eviction, Liz stated, her voice crisp and clear, cutting through the silence. Mason stumbled back a step. Eviction? What? That's impossible. You can't do that. You need 30 days. This is illegal. He started sputtering, his arms waving wildly. All that fintech entrepreneur bravado dissolved instantly into panicked confusion. One of the police officers, the tall man, took a slight step forward, establishing his presence. Sir, please remain calm. We are here to enforce a judge's order. I suggest you listen carefully to Ms. Chen. Liz didn't even glance at Mason's ridiculous panic. She unfolded the document and held it out toward him. As you illegally changed the locks on this property and prevented the legal owner from entry, a self-help eviction, you have created an exigent circumstance. This document is a court order, signed by Judge Harrison at 6:15 p.m. this evening, ordering the immediate vacation of the premises by all occupants not named on the deed. Mason's eyes were darting from Liz to the police officers. His breathing was shallow. He still looked like he was searching for the loophole, the synergy he could exploit to win. This is fraud. Charlotte is family. He lives here. We're engaged, he protested, trying to pivot his argument. She may be Ms. Harper's daughter, but Ms. Harper is the sole owner and has neither transferred the deed nor granted rights of residency to you. Furthermore, changing the locks and denying the owner access constitutes criminal trespass. The officers are here to escort you and Ms. Harper's daughter off the premises immediately, Liz explained patiently, though her eyes were cold. Just then, Charlotte appeared, walking down the stairs and into the entryway, holding a box of what looked like her art supplies. She stopped short when she saw the police, me and Liz. The color didn't drain from her face. Instead, she looked utterly furious. Mom? What is this? What are you doing? Charlotte shouted, dropping the box. The sound echoed dramatically in the foyer. Are you seriously doing this right now? Right after Clara's funeral? This was the rising drama. Charlotte, my own daughter, trying to use the grief over her aunt's death as emotional leverage against me. I remembered Liz's strict instructions. You say nothing. I didn't argue. I didn't plead. I simply looked at my daughter, my face carefully blank, and then I silently pointed to the aqua blue planters and the skull doormat. It was a silent callback to the disrespect they had shown, a visual representation of their arrogance and entitlement. Charlotte immediately understood the weight of my silence. She turned on Mason. What did you do, Mason? You told me this was all taken care of. You said she was old and wouldn't fight. Mason ignored her, focused instead on Liz, trying one last desperate move. Wait. I need to call my lawyer. You can't just throw us out. We have property inside. Furniture. Mr. Mason, the court order states you have 30 minutes to collect essential items only: clothing, medications, personal identification. You may return by appointment next week to collect any non-essential property, which will be logged and inventoried, Liz said, completely unmoved. She nodded to the police officers. The taller officer pulled a small notepad and a timer from his pocket. Sir, ma'am, the timer starts now. 30 minutes. Please cooperate. Anything that remains after the buzzer sounds will be moved into external storage at your expense. This was the turning point and the highest point of drama. Mason had relied on his assumption that he could bully an old woman into submission. He relied on the emotional vulnerability of my grief. What he failed to calculate was the legal preparedness and sheer focused determination that comes from being truly fundamentally wronged. His whole plan hinged on me backing down, and instead I had called in an airstrike. Mason started rambling, trying to find the court seal on the document Liz still held, looking frantically for a lawyer's number on his phone. Charlotte stood frozen, staring at me, her initial anger morphing into a dawning, terrible realization of the consequences of her actions. Mom, please. We can talk about this. Just tell them to leave, Charlotte begged, taking a step toward me. I maintained my silence, my gaze steady. I didn't argue. I let the lawyer and the court order speak. The police officer reiterated, firmly but calmly, "Ma'am, please start collecting your belongings. The clock is running." Mason threw his hands up in defeat, letting out a frustrated roar that echoed off the hallway walls. He slammed the door and stomped toward the stairs. Fine. But you haven't heard the last of this, Amelia. As Mason disappeared up the stairs, stomping dramatically, Charlotte remained in the foyer. She really looked at me for the first time in what felt like years. I saw a flicker of genuine panic but also a deep-seated resentment. She was still blaming me for her circumstances, not Mason or her own actions. "This is your fault, Mom," she whispered, her eyes wet with unshed tears. "You never wanted me to be happy. You always hated Mason." I finally broke my silence just a little, keeping my voice low and steady. "No, Charlotte. I always wanted you to be happy. What I hated was watching you let a man convince you that my death or ruin was the only path to your success. Now go pack." I stepped across the threshold. Mason had tried to deny me, and the police officers followed me in, holding the door for Liz. I walked right past Charlotte, past the stacked boxes of Mason's industrial furniture, and up the stairs to my room. I was home, and they had 30 minutes left of their illegal residency. As I walked up the stairs, the air in my house felt thick with hostility and shock. Mason was already tearing through the master bedroom, shoving clothes into an expensive duffel bag. Charlotte was just standing in the hallway, looking utterly lost, staring into the closet where her few belongings hung alongside mine. The police officers were professional and discreet, maintaining a presence without being overbearing. One stood near the top of the stairs and the other remained downstairs with Liz. I didn't go into my room right away. Instead, I walked down the hall to the small office Robert and I used. I went straight to the heavy, fireproof safe hidden behind a bookshelf, inputting the combination. A number I knew by heart, the date of my wedding anniversary. I pulled out a single document, the original, embossed, official deed to the property at 452 Willow Lane. I walked back down the stairs, ignoring Mason's loud complaints and muttering about ridiculous, petty old women. Charlotte was still rooted in the foyer, looking dazed. She finally started gathering a few things, shoving them haphazardly into a tote bag. I met Liz in the living room, which now featured Mason's giant, ugly black leather ottoman sitting right in the middle of my Persian rug. 15 minutes, Ms. Harper," Liz whispered to me, checking her watch. "They are starting to move faster." I nodded and, without a word, walked back to the front door, where Mason was currently having a loud, agitated conversation on his phone, presumably with a lawyer who wasn't answering on a Wednesday night. "I'm telling you, Greg, the old lady has gone psycho. She showed up with cops. They're illegally evicting us. She has to sign the house over to Charlotte. She's too old to live here. It's a huge waste of capital." He ranted into the phone, clearly trying to sound like the victim. I waited until he finished his sentence, then cleared my throat lightly. Mason spun around, phone still pressed to his ear, his face a mask of furious indignation. "What, Amelia? What now? You came to gloat? You're going to regret this, I promise you. When our lawyer gets wind of this illegal harassment, you'll be the one losing the house." I took the official deed, which was mounted on heavy cardstock, and held it up right in front of his face. I didn't say a word. I just tapped the document lightly with my index finger, pointing directly at the line where my name was printed in large, bold font. Amelia C. Harper, sole owner. His eyes, frantic and searching, scanned the official seals, the notary stamps and the bold type. This wasn't a copy or a printout. This was the real, undeniable legal document. The phone slipped from his grasp and clattered silently onto my hardwood floor. His mouth opened but no sound came out. The dawning realization was slow, agonizing, and complete. He thought I was old and forgetful. He thought I hadn't prepared. He thought he could exploit a moment of grief. He had assumed arrogantly that because Charlotte was my daughter he had leverage, or that some vague family law would protect him. He never considered that Robert and I had planned meticulously for exactly this type of scenario. The deed was in my name only, and my lawyer had just happily reminded him that possession is 9/10 of the law, and the law was on my side. You never transferred the deed?" he stammered, the confidence completely gone, replaced by naked panic. "But Charlotte said, she said you were going to put her name on it. She said you agreed." I fixed him with a stare that held 30 years of ownership, 30 years of hard work, and the absolute certainty of my legal position. "I didn't argue, Mason," I finally said, echoing the words I hadn't spoken on the porch. "I called my lawyer." The buzzer on the police officer's timer went off, a sharp, unfeeling sound. "Time's up, sir." Ma'am, please proceed to the door. Charlotte came downstairs, dragging her tote bag, looking shell-shocked. She looked at the deed in my hand, then at Mason's defeated posture, and the anger completely dissolved, leaving only fear and devastation. The full weight of the betrayal and the failure of their scheme had finally landed. Mom, please. Where are we supposed to go? Charlotte asked, her voice cracking. That, I replied, the emotion finally entering my voice, cool and regretful, is a question you should have asked Mason before you helped him change the locks on your mother's house while she was burying her sister. The officers escorted them to the door. As Mason was pushed gently out, he stopped right in front of the new skull doormat. He looked back at me, pure hatred in his eyes, but it was the impotent hatred of a man who had lost everything because of his own profound stupidity and greed. Enjoy your dusty old house, Amelia, he sneered, picking up his dropped phone. I will, I said, meeting his gaze. And Mason? Your car is illegally parked, blocking my driveway. If it's still there in 10 minutes, I'm having it towed. At your expense. That was the last straw for him. He stormed down the path, grabbing the awful aqua planters and throwing them into the front lawn in a final childish fit of pique before jumping into his expensive black sedan and screeching out of the neighborhood. Charlotte, meanwhile, was ushered into a waiting taxi Liz had thoughtfully called, her head bowed in humiliation. I stood there in my doorway, flanked by my amazing lawyer and 2 police officers, watching their rented transport disappear down the street. The house was quiet again. The silence was restorative, clean, and complete. Liz smiled, a genuine warm smile. The deed is in your name, Amelia. Happy to remind them. I closed the door, locking the new lock, which Liz had already provided me with a key for, of course. I looked at the hideous skull doormat. My first act of business? I picked it up, carried it straight out to the curb, and threw it right on top of the shattered remains of Mason's aqua planters. It was a tough day. A terrible, heartbreaking day. But in the end, I had my home back, and I had delivered a swift, legally devastating lesson to 2 very entitled people who thought they could steamroll a grieving woman. I was not too old to live alone. I was exactly the right age to defend myself. If you enjoyed watching Mason and Charlotte get their immediate, legally binding karma, hit the like button and subscribe. And drop a comment below. Tell me the pettiest thing you would have done to those ugly blue planters.